But thank you all for having me. Like Sharon said, my name is Eric Conley. I'm the Garrad County 4-H Youth Development Agent. And um, as far as my background is concerned, I have a bachelor's degree in literature, a master's degree in recreation and parks administration, and then I was in the process of working on another master's degree in biology, uh, primarily plant systematics before we couldn't go to regional universities anymore. I don't know that I'm done with that. I'm just I guess kind of on a pause for right now. But thank you all for having me. I do want to talk a little bit about Kentucky native plants today, and I'm looking forward to the questions at the end. Native plants are really a passion of mine. Over the last year during the pandemic, I've been doing this series of wildflower videos called On the Ground, and they've been, I don't want to say hugely successful, but people have watched them. I don't know how many people. I know that 80, 100 maybe. I'm not really sure, but I've really enjoyed it. And Kentucky is such an incredible state to get out and see a lot of beautiful native plants. And so I hope that you all enjoy it. And if you all have questions about maybe the plants that we're looking at, I know that I'm amongst people that know all of these things, but if you have questions about the plants that we're looking at in the photographs, or if you have questions about the photographs, then feel free to ask. So let me move through here, maybe. So just introduction of Kentucky native plants. So as far as the plant diversity of Kentucky is concerned, I'm not going to spend the whole time reading to you all, but we're incredibly diverse in Kentucky, especially as small of a state as we have as far as land mass is concerned. And primarily, most of that diversity comes from the broad range of habitat that we have available. If you're talking about, 4,300 feet above sea level in eastern Kentucky, with Black Mountain all the way down to just a few hundred feet above sea level when you get into the western part of the state near the Mississippi River. Um, we have a ton of habitat, and even within each of those individual areas of those physiographic regions that we have in Kentucky, we have all kinds of microhabitats, and you are more aware than anyone, I'm sure, that it just takes something to block wind in one spot, or something to provide shade or open sun up, and when that happens, then you get all of these potential microclimates and microhabitats that appear. And as long as the conditions are correct, you can have plants that'll grow in just about anywhere. So but 856 different genera represented. And these are some different numbers than a presentation that I did recently. We had looked at, and we'll actually kind of examine those numbers a little bit as well. Over 2,100, nearly 2,200 native species in Kentucky, and then 570 non-native species, 2,742 different species found in Kentucky. So as far as Kentucky is concerned, this is just a chart, and you'll notice the difference in the number from 2,742 total species. You'll notice the number is a little bit different on this chart. So this one is to just kind of give you an idea of the comparison between the two, or not the two, but the multiple states that are around us, or at least are that they compare with as far as topography, access to water, the hydrology, like I said, soil types, geology, all of those things. So these states are somewhat comparable, or they touch Kentucky. Pennsylvania is a little bit of an outlier there, but this is just to give you an indication of what we look like as far as our native plants are across Kentucky. So you can see that Kentucky has, in this one it says 2030, and this actually came from Ron Jones. Well, this one, it says the resource there is as of 2001, but this came from Dr. Ron Jones' book, Plant Life of Kentucky, and that was published in 2005. So in the last 15 years, we have another 140 plants that we're looking at in Kentucky that have been discovered over the last few years. So within those plants, those native plants that we have in Kentucky, we do have a few endemics that we that we only find here in Kentucky. One of those is Leavenworthia exigua, the variation Laciniata or Lacinata, and that's the Kentucky Glade crest. That one is actually found in Jefferson County, in Bullitt County. So there's some areas in there, and those areas are being threatened. Obviously, when you have urban areas like that, you are going to have a situation where progress and just any kind of building and construction is going to do a lot of damage to those habitats. And so I think those are. I don't know that those are protected right now, but I think that there's a lot of effort being made, especially since it's endemic only to Kentucky. Solidago Albopolosa, which is the white-haired goldenrod, which is found in the Red River Gorge within about a 5-mile area of the Red River Gorge. And you'll see some images of that here in just a second. And then Trifolium kentuckiense, which is the Kentucky clover, which was actually just, and when I say recently discovered, within the last 10 to 15 years, as a matter of fact, I think it was 8 years ago that it was discovered. And so that's a new species of clover that's found in Kentucky. But those are the 3 endemics that we have in our native plant arsenal. So this one is the white-haired goldenrod, which is one of our endemics. You can see why it's called the white-haired goldenrod. It's that extremely pilose hair that runs along the stem there. And this one is really unique in where it grows. And so it's found, like I said, in the Red River Gorge. And then it grows only behind the drip lines in sandstone rock shelters. So the habitat is very specific. The problem with that habitat is that if you've ever been in the gorge, the most popular places for people to either walk, hike, camp, build fires is usually underneath those rock shelters. And so the habitat becomes desecrated by those people that are trying to get in there and maybe even just get out of the rain, or that they want to camp in there. I believe it's actually illegal to camp in those areas, but that doesn't stop people from doing it. But it's a really beautiful flower, and that the best example of it and the most accessible example of it is located at the Nada Tunnel in Powell County. So if you go to Powell County and go to the Nada Tunnel and you're coming from the Slade side of it, then you can, there's actually a pull off, and there's a trail, and there's a sign, and there's fencing and everything else, and you can actually go and see this plant. So, and it is federally endangered, like I said, only found in Kentucky. This is one that is historic in Kentucky. We have not found native species of this one. This is showy lady slipper. And this photograph actually came from Tennessee. This is one that we haven't seen in Kentucky in more than 50 years, I believe. And so they consider it extirpated or historic in Kentucky. And these are all the different habitats that you would normally find it in. And the one that we find it in Tennessee that I go and photograph it is one of those calcareous fens. And so it's a really spectacular plant, but from what I understand, it is fairly easy to grow in the garden. So if you can get it established in landscape or in a garden, it does actually fairly well in a garden situation. So as far as our native plants are concerned, and then the conservation status of plants, you can see that more than 1,600 of those plants are actually secure. And so it's great that our native plants, at least the bulk of our native plants, are doing fairly well. 116 plants on the watch list, 53 of special concern, 101 threatened, 176 native plants are actually listed as endangered. and 38 plants historic, 18 are extirpated. Sorry, those numbers. They generally base those numbers off of what is called NatureServe, which is a data collection site, and you can get on that site and you can look up plants and see what their status is, their conservation status is, and all of this information came from the Office of Kentucky Nature Preserves, the 2020 annual report, which you can also look up. And there's a lot of great information, not just about the status of native plants, but if you're interested in any natural resource, plants, insects, aquatic, freshwater mussels, whatever it might be, it's a great resource of information. And not only those individual species, but also the habitat that they live in as well. So these are the natural regions of Kentucky. Probably every one of you all have seen this 1,000 times. So these are the different natural regions and physiographic regions, which you find within them. As you all know, there's the three areas that we look at, but then the cool thing about Kentucky is that we have all of these little, like these small places. If you look out on the far western, you see that we have even a touch of the coastal plain, and so which wraps around Kentucky and bypasses a majority of Tennessee and then gets down into back over into South Carolina and North Carolina. So we just have a little bit of those that area that exists in Kentucky. And one of the things that I always find fascinating about the natural regions is we get terribly hung up on these natural regions and these physiographic regions, because this is kind of the framework, like it says there, of where we find certain plants. And I always refer back to, and in every plant presentation, you should always have a reference back to Jeff Goldblum from Jurassic Park, because life finds a way and plants find a way generally. So as an example, this is one of our endangered plants in Kentucky, and this is called French's shooting star. If you look at where the species is actually observed, you can see that it is across a number of the natural regions of Kentucky. So to think that we're only going to find it in the eastern part of the state or the central part of the state or the western would be ignorant of what plants are so capable of doing as far as the way that they distribute themselves. Now, they were probably even, I know it lists historic observation there, but it was probably even wide. It had a wider distribution even before that, but I'm sure that records don't really keep that. We probably have not found all the populations of that particular plant. And for those of you all that are really watching the scientific names, those binomials, I know that shooting stars are out of Dodecathion now, and I think they've moved on to a different one. I think Primula maybe is the new genus of that one, and so I apologize. So some of the declining factors, and this came out of the Rare Wildflowers of Kentucky with Dr. Barnes and Deborah White and Mark Evans. One is going to be habitat loss. We lose an incredible amount of habitat. You all have seen all of the maps, I'm sure, before, of what the state looked like at one point with wetlands and as far as forest land is concerned. And by no means am I a person that is trying to impede progress. I know that we have to build things. I know that we have to live places. I know that we have to have food, all of those things. So we just need to make sure that we find these pockets of area that are incredibly pristine, or they hold things that would be considered natural treasures as far as plants or animals. And we need to make sure that we protect those areas as much as we possibly can. But habitat loss, and there's a number of the things that you'll see under habitat loss are not just, it's not just a matter of like something coming in and digging it up or putting construction on or building a parking lot on it, but it may be habitat loss due to something else. So the other one is habitat fragmentation, where you're going to get a lot of, although habitat fragmentation sometimes can create some genetic diversity within plant species, a lot of times it doesn't allow for populations to establish, or it does not allow for those limited populations to, because of very specific growing needs, they sometimes they do not survive. And that may be the fragmentation comes from what insects may be there to pollinate. It may be as a cause of an animal that's not present in that particular area anymore, whatever it might be. But fragmentation is also an issue that we're dealing with as far as the decline in native plants. Uh, this is one of those things that in habitat loss, I was talking specifically about invasive exotic species. I probably don't need to go through the entire list of everything that you all know exists out there, but here in central Kentucky, we deal with bush honeysuckle and purple winter creeper and kudzu. Um, I mean, the list goes on and on, multiflora rose, whatever it might be. And so the introduction of invasive exotic species, obviously, I don't need to tell any of you all about how photosynthesis works, but that one in particular is one that we probably could do something about. But and this is one that, as far as extension employees are concerned, or master gardeners or whatever you might be, this is where education comes in more than anything, especially as we start to have people come in and reach out to us about preparing gardens or what they would like to see in their own landscape, is to steer them in a direction away from those invasive exotics that we know are probably still being sold in mass, around the country, especially or even in just Kentucky. Pollution is another issue, and here in Garrad County, we are not immune to having people find the most beautiful sides of the road to leave all of their garbage. And so that's one of those things that we continuously struggle with, and the introduction of chemicals into the soil that may eliminate certain species from, not certain, but a lot of species from the opportunity to grow in an area. People, we are kind of the worst sometimes. And as a photographer, photographers and I say photographer, let me be clear, as an extremely amateur photographer is what I would consider myself. People are kind of the worst. I was at a photography contest a few years ago, and there was in eastern Kentucky, there was a whole hillside, probably 40 yellow lady slippers, like the one in the picture there. There was just a beautiful hillside of them, and it was in the area that we were designated to do this photography contest. And when I went there, there was probably 4 or 5 plants that had been just stepped on and crushed because somebody was trying to get to the one that they thought was the most ideal. So people are kind of the worst, and not just that, but the over collection. So we see something in nature and we think, oh, that would look beautiful in my garden, and we collect it, or we just generally over collect it. And we're seeing a lot of this with some of those plants that have traditional medicinal value, things like ginseng, things like golden seal. Those have historic medicinal value, or even current modern medicinal value, and that's another issue that we're dealing with as far as keeping native plants around. So some of the families that we see in Kentucky, and I hesitated to even put Kentucky plant families in here because you are all horticulture people. You all probably know all of this, and you've probably seen several of these, but I thought, if nothing else, some people would get to see some pretty pictures, and they can ask me about what it is that we're looking at, where we find those kinds of things, and what they would look like in a landscape. So let's we'll kind of march through some of the families here. This is the milkweed family, and milkweeds, perennial herbs, umbel-like clusters, milky sap, and we have a number of different native examples of milkweed in Kentucky, and really just an incredible plant. it has become even more popular recently, probably in the last 15 to 20 years, as people have marched towards, putting in butterfly gardens or trying to create acceptable habitat for butterflies. And so there's a number of opportunities or a number of options for the milkweed family. So, but just generally a very showy, beautiful family of flowers that we have in Kentucky. The Aster family, which is the bane of my existence and my nemesis as far as flowers are concerned. I find that outside of just a few, probably 30 or 40 different genera, that I'm just staring at, I think, just the same flower over and over again. And I'm so terrified to get out a key and actually try and work through the key to figure out what they are. But the Astra family, as you all know, is the largest family, approximately 32,000. There's a lot of members of the family that are valuable to wildlife, and not just valuable to wildlife, but also valuable to us. And so you can see, and I don't need to explain the plant physiology to you all, but two different flowers that exist there: the ray flowers on asters, and then also the disc flowers or the disc florets, which are in the center there. And you can see those in just about every example of, and you can see the ray flowers and the disc flowers as better examples in, our cone flowers or echinacea, and then rudbeckias that are in bloom right now that we're seeing quite a bit of. The orchid family, this is by far, if asters are the bane of my existence and my nemesis, these are my heroes. We have a pretty limited population of orchids in the state of Kentucky, and they are incredibly specialized as far as where they grow, their habitat, the requirements for them. As you all are probably aware, they do have mycorrhizal, and most plants have some sort of mycorrhizal relationship. But orchids, of course, require that. The ones that you see here, the one on the left is called lesser rattlesnake plant, and it's only found in one county in Kentucky, so it's actually one of our endangered plants. And then there is yellow fringed orchid there. The white one is called monkey-faced orchid or white fringeless orchid. It is actually federally endangered. And then the one on the right-hand side is pink lady slippers. And they are, from what I understand about pink lady slippers, they are very difficult to grow in garden, but they are probably the most abundant, well, the second most abundant orchid that we find in Kentucky. Perennial herbs, they're a monocot, and of course, they're a huge family because they are generally very specialized. And then the lateral petals, and then of course that third petal that becomes a lip or a cup, depending on the orchid that you're looking at. As far as Kentucky is concerned, 43 different species found in Kentucky, and because of the habitat, they more than 50% of those are endangered or threatened. The birthwort family, I think that they are really cool, very small, but considered paleo herbs. So they have characteristics of both monocots and dicots. Wild ginger is in this group, and then of course this isn't limited to just herbs or forbs on the ground, but also woody vines. And so this is where you get Aristolochia Macrophylla, which is blah. Dutchman's pipe, sorry, if you're looking for a common name. The Lilly family, monocots, this is all kind of basic systematic stuff for you all, but we have some really outstanding examples of lily. Canada lily is in bloom right now, and it is a really spectacular. Wood lily is actually probably going to be in bloom in the next couple of weeks, and is really another beautiful flower. And wood lily is actually considered endangered in Kentucky, but you can find it in kind of some of the southern counties of Kentucky. Really, just a beautiful family of plants. This one is actually, I think, wrong now. So it's not, or maybe, no. This one is correct. So Fumariaceae with the fumitory family. And the examples there, of course, are squirrel corn on the left and then Dutchman's breeches, which is on the right. And this is one that, has that feathery looking leaf shape to it. Just not a very showy, but a beautiful plant, especially the group as a family. It's just a beautiful group because they have a lot of variation in flower shape. The one on the left there is called Rock Harlequin, and it's really a stunning little flower. But that flower that you're seeing there is probably maybe a centimeter long, and that one was found up on in Bell County at Pine Mountain State Park. So I'm going to power through some of these others here. The Jensen family, and the one on the left there is one of my favorite plants because I've read somewhere that it's a triennial, but I've also seen it where it doesn't bloom for several years. It's called American Colombo. It's really a gorgeous plant, and can get to be huge, but it takes it quite a while to actually get a bloom on it. The Broom Rape family. And all of these are root parasitic. That's bear corn, Canophilus americana that's there. And it has some other names to it, some of which are politically incorrect. And so, but bear corn is the one that we'll go with. And there's a number of different ones. Broom rape, there's a single flowered broom rape that's really pretty, and it's small, almost give you an idea that it would be in the same family as the Indian pipe family. And we have a few different species of Indian pipes, the monotropes, and so the one that you see here, that's Monotropus or Monotropa hypopythis. And then we also have Monotropa odorata, which is just a gorgeous little flower. And I think I actually have a slide of it near the end. And it's the one that smells so wonderful. So all of these really cool plants like this are violets. They make up an entire ecosystem and landscape. And most of these were taken in eastern and southern Kentucky, a few here in Garrad County as well. I've not traveled much out west, but it's definitely an area I want to get to. The Trillium Group. This is a very showy group, and I'm always fascinated by this one because they have that special relationship with ants. So their seeds are dispersed via what is called myrmecochory, which is the ants taking those seeds into their home and then chewing away the elaiosome and then basically taking the seed and discarding it because they're not going to eat that part. And then you get seeds that are planted for these trilliums. So really just an amazing group, especially that relationship. And I think I've just got one or two more. This is, of course, Lily of the Valley family. It used to be in the Lilly family, and still probably is in some texts. But this is false Solomon seal and Solomon seal, which are fairly common in Kentucky. The poppy family, which we've had some movement in, of course, woodland poppy, and then the other one there was bloodroot. So a couple of those representatives, generally milky sap, and bloodroot is one of my favorites because of the historic medicinal issues or medicinal values with it, and then of course the poison issues with it, because a lot of people would try and use that sap, and it's still actually I think used in toothpaste, but just a cool group of plants. And I think this is the last one, the Ranunculus group and the buttercups. And this is one of those that sometimes I struggle with only because I find them to be, they end up being a weedy plant, especially as you get into middle to late summer. But it's still a lot of native plants. And then Delphinium, which is one of the more common and showy spring wildflowers that we have. So this is the application of the native plants to landscape gardening section. So designing with native plants. And this is something that I don't have a whole lot of experience with. We've tried to do it at home, but as an extension agent, and I'm sure all of you all are well aware, if you're not at home, it's hard to take care of plants. And so I have an orchid that's actually growing in my office and has been here for a couple of years. And generally about every month, I think it's probably on its last leg, and then it springs back to life. But um, uh, I encourage native plants when people come into our office, and we do not have a horticulture agent. So I become a de facto horticulture agent occasionally, but I encourage native plants only because of there's easily adaptable to local soils, depending on how disturbed that soil has been. But I can give some recommendations to post after a soil sample, or if they can kind of describe the habitat to me, give some recommendation about what native plants may be more apt to grow in that area. Native plants are always, of course, great for food, for local wildlife, and for pollinators. And pollinators being one of those things that we're really trying to focus on right now. And so, we have active beehives here at the office, and we have a lot of people in the community that are starting to work towards bees and putting those hives in, and trying to give them an idea of other plants that they can use, especially native plants that they can use in a garden, a surrounding garden, for opportunities for their bees. And then the conservation and propagation of local flora types. Like I was talking about with the showy lady slipper, it's one of those plants that we don't see here in Kentucky, but if we can get populations reestablished in those areas or in different areas, then maybe it might be something that we see in a natural landscape outside of a manicured landscape situation, but it might be something that we can see in a natural habitat at some point. But it's always great to use native plants, especially those that you don't want to take them out of their native habitat unless it's an absolute necessity to rescue those plants. But it's great to be able to use local flora to do some of that. And then, just creating a sense of place unique to your state. And all of this came out of that Mississippi State. I think that's actually I mistyped there. It should just be MS, not MIS. But creating a sense of place in your state. So putting in some of our local flora, and there's great ways to do that. Introducing native plants into a design so that you have a running blooming period. A lot of times people they get hung up on the fact that we have this beautiful spring wildflower season, and then they don't really see as many showy plants as they do in the springtime. And then that becomes frustrating to people because they think I can only plant these things from the spring, and then it all just dies back. And I just have a bare spot where if they would put in some different things, and that's where we come in as far as education and extension is concerned. So additional publication, the one on the left there, the flower on the left, that's the sweet pine sap that I was talking about, that Monotropa odorata, and it has just a fantastic smell. And then of course the one on the right we're seeing a lot of right now, that Campsis radicans, which is the Trumpet Creeper. So this is I've a couple of the things that I put in. I think I actually put these in the chat before we started. And this is a great publication from Rutgers University, and it talks about organizing it really organizes the approach to putting in a residential garden and how to step by step go through. Now, I know it's from Rutgers, I know it's New Jersey, but the same concepts can be applied to a Kentucky landscape as far as putting in native plants or a native plant garden. Tom Barnes, Wild About Wildflowers, and Dr. Barnes, he spoke about, so there's just some general information about wildflowers, also with some information about cost of gardening with wildflowers and the benefits as well, which we've talked a little bit about. And then some of the other resources, the Plant Life of Kentucky. This, since I can't see your all's hands and ask for a show of hands, how many people have this book? It's a great book, but it is an extremely intense dichotomous key, and it is heavy. I'm talking like physically got some density to it, heavy. So it's one that if you're going to go out in the field or you're trying to lead a group or a master gardener group and you're going to take a native wildflower hike, this would not be the one you'd want to take out and try and key out plants with, because it's heavy. But the first few chapters of the book are great about the natural history, and then the artwork is fantastic. So there are no photographs in it. The only photograph is the one that you see on the cover there, and then the rest of the book is there's some beautiful drawings throughout it. And I actually went to graduate school with one of the women who had done some of the drawings within the book. This is by far my favorite. The Wildflowers of Tennessee, Ohio Valley, and Southern Appalachians. This is a fantastic book. Great guide, beautiful images. It's not terribly durable, or at least it hasn't been terribly durable for me. But that's probably because I'm generally rough on things, and so this is a really great book. A lot of great images in it. A lot of really good, plant characteristic information. And then the thing that I love the most about this particular book is it has a lot of historical information, a lot of folklore about each of the individual plants. And so when you read about it, you're not just getting some of the stuff that maybe we as plant people might think is very interesting, but if you're with a group, and I use a lot of this information when I especially do groups with kids or group walks or hikes with kids, is I want to make sure I have information that's not just like, hey, look, this is a yellow lady zipper, Cypripedium, calceolus, and they're like, I don't really care about any of that. But if they know some of the things about where the name come from and that information, it usually makes it a lot better. The Newcomb's Wildflower Guide. This is a decent guide, and it's also a great dichotomous key if you need something that's a little bit more compact and you aren't looking to start being a bodybuilder and carrying around Dr. Jones' book. You can carry around the Newcomb's Wildflower Guide. It's generally pretty good. There's a few things that are missing, some great drawings that are in it, but not nearly as much information as some of the other books. The Wildflowers and Ferns of Kentucky, which is Dr. Barnes and Francis. And so this one has really great images in it. The information is a little bit limited, although in the back there's some great information about families and about characteristics of families. And so it's well done back there, but there's not as much information with each of the images. And then the family information, like I said, there is really good and set up in color and in season. So it makes it a little bit easier to use. And then, of course, you have to go kind of a modern route. There's iNaturalist. There's Leaf Snap. Or something like that. But iNaturalist is the one that I generally use if I'm in the field and I'm kind of curious about what a particular plant is and I'm feeling especially lazy and don't want to key something out. iNaturalist does generally a very good job of just providing at least a direction that I would want to go in. And in addition to that, there's a number of projects. You can set up individual projects for your county. You could set up individual projects for master gardeners or whatever it might be. If you wanted to do sort of an inventory of your local community or county or your section of the state, this is a really great one. There's some 4-H projects that are going on right now, a bio blitz actually across the state, not just for plants, but for just about anything. And so you can set up projects, long-term projects. That the bio blitz that we've set up for 4-H is a year-long project. And so you can set up some long-term projects if you're interested in doing that. If you have a natural area in your community and you want to do an inventory of that, I know that information becomes really valuable to some of our state agencies, whether they be the Office of Nature Preserves or your local parks, local government, state parks, U.S. Fish and Wildlife. If you are so inclined to go that far up into federal, but whatever it is. So iNaturalist is a really good modern app, and the information becomes valuable once you've entered it into that app. And it is an app on your phone, but you can also log into it on a computer as well.